I'm Israel Anderson, and welcome to another Sunday Jesus service. Today, we are continuing to explore the Eden story. We did the Two Gardens and a Snake Bible study over 5 years ago. And that I was completely surprised a couple of weeks ago when I looked it up live and saw that that video has had 150,000 views. Well, I had no idea. I think the last time I checked it was around 80,000. I thought that was impressive. I don't really pay attention to all the stats. So that was really amazing. And that's a 2 hour and 40 minute long study. And what we're going to do is redo the whole thing from scratch, which is what we're going to look at today, part of it, a tiny part of it. And I've kept saying that the whole study will be longer than the 2 hours, but what we'll do is we'll do a 1 hour overview, like an introduction, that will lay out all the basics without getting into any evidence because we won't have time. And then we'll do additional studies that go back over it all, point by point by point, break it all down, show all of the evidence, and that will not be the 7 or 8 hours I started off saying. I think a couple of weeks ago I said it's maybe going to be looking like 10 to 12 hours. I was thinking about it last night as I'm putting this together, which is just preliminary. And this is going to take us a long time to get through, and yet it's just preliminary. I think once I have completely recreated the whole study, we're going to be looking at somewhere between 20 and 30 hours. There's a lot to get through here. Now, if you haven't watched the current Two Gardens and a Snake, you should do that. I'll leave it up online once the new ones are out. But you'll see a massive difference. You learn a lot, right? Because and you think about it, it's about 8.5 years ago when I started to discover these things in the Bible. And so that was only about 3 years after that. Well, I've learned an awful lot in 5 years. And even just putting all the study together, I've learned so much more. And one of the hardest things to grasp, to accept, to come to terms with in the Garden of Eden story is, who is the Nachash? Now, Nachash is the Hebrew word that we translate in the Eden story and other places throughout the Bible as serpent. And we're going to get into a lot of this right now. But we have been told that the serpent is Satan by Christianity. That's what Roman Catholicism has taught the world. Remember, all Christianity is a slightly reformed offshoot of Roman Catholicism. I'm not aware of any sect of Christianity, including Seventh-day Adventists, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Armstrongism, everything that's out there, whether it's considered a cult by mainstream Christian apologetics or not, everything is an offshoot of Catholicism. They start with the basis of the teachings from Roman Catholicism, even when they're against Roman Catholicism. Example, all those four groups I just mentioned are wildly anti-Catholicism, yet they take all their doctrines and beliefs. Well, except a few. Obviously, they just change a few here and there. But some of them, like Jehovah's Witnesses, they are, seriously anti-Catholic. And they say, quite blunt things about Catholicism. But they're just Reformed Catholics. They're in denial of that, but they are just Reformed Catholics. Excuse me, my lips are dry. It's radically low humidity here, below the ability of my hydrometers to even detect the humidity. Just turn this down a touch. So the idea that the snake might not be Satan and might actually be somebody else and might actually be Jesus is very difficult to accept, especially when you first hear it. When you first hear it, you're just like, wow, dude. And, I see all the comments people leave. I search my name from time to time, and I see what people are saying across the internet. And, people don't say some very nice things about me, right? They say some pretty nasty things. And I understand why. I'm in the same boat that you are, or I was in the same boat. If someone had approached me 10 years ago with the things I'm teaching today, I would have gone off at them. I was the ultra zealous Christian apologist. I was deeply Trinitarian. And that's so different today. I think it's a sign of wisdom and maturity to be able to reevaluate things that you believe, to let go of belief and pursue the evidence where it leads. It's not easy to do those things. The truth does not come easily. It comes to those that are brave enough to pursue it. So as we go through this study today, if you've been following me for a while, this may not be that shocking. But if you haven't been, maybe someone has sent this video to you today. What you're going to see here will sound, at the start, to be radically blasphemous. Well, all I can say is watch all the way to the end. You can see me here on camera. You can perceive and pick up things about who I am, my character, my personality. And you'll see that blasphemy is not on my lips. I have served the Lord since I gave my life to him at 11 years of age in Pastor John Steele's church in North Shore Faith Center in Auckland, New Zealand. And I have not backslidden a single day in my entire life. And I've served the kingdom. I've served in ministry all my life. I'm migrated to the United States to work for a Christian ministry in Texas. And what I'm doing now is the continuation of that. So if you're new, please be patient. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying here. As I say in the original Two Gardens and a Snake and in many other studies, all you have to do is look at what I'm presenting and just say, well, isn't that interesting? That's it. Wish I had a wider screen. Isn't that interesting? Just leave it at that. You don't have to commit to anything. You don't have to go, I believe that or I don't believe that. Don't even make that judgment. Just look at it and go, well, isn't that interesting? Okay? I recognize that the things we're going to cover today are highly controversial. And I don't teach these things to be controversial. I'm not a contrarian by nature. I'm a curious person. I love knowledge. I love wisdom. When Jesus said in Matthew 6:33 to seek first the kingdom of his Father and what has his Father's approval, I have taken that to heart so much. That really has been the verse that has identified my approach to life. Seek first the kingdom of God and what has his approval. So we will do that today. So with those comments out of the way, let's dive in, remembering all that, and we will take some time here today. Are we on the right screen? No, now we are. And we will learn things that Roman Catholicism, who invented this faith that so many of us have come from, does not want us to learn about, because they have lied to us. And that will become so obvious as we go through this study and all the ones that are going to make up the entire Two Gardens and a Snake study. So, trying to balance the temperature here. I don't want to turn my heater off because it's 24 degrees Fahrenheit outside. All right. We had a lot of technical difficulties this morning. We're recording this live to the audience on X, Twitter, and we started an hour late. We've been having these constant technical difficulties, which I don't have at any other time. It's very obviously a spiritual thing. And but here we are now, so let's get into it. 362 of you watching live. I appreciate that. Now's a good time to like. If you're watching this on YouTube, like it, subscribe, turn that bell on. Otherwise, they won't tell you anything. The Nachash. We're going to look at an introduction. Then we're going to look at scholarship versus apologetics. We're going to look at Eden's shining Nachash. We're going to look at Enki, the Nachash, and Jesus. We're going to look at the bronze serpent inside the law. We're going to look at the serpent healer across history. We're going to look at how Jesus reclaims the serpent role. We're going to address Revelation and its mention of the dragon, because a lot of people conflate that with the Nachash and Eden. They're not the same thing, but Christianity, Catholicism, has linked them together to tell their fictitious story. And we are going to debunk that today. And then we'll end it with choosing the true healer. So, buckle your seatbelts, Dorothy, because Kansas is going bye-bye. Let's get into it. Introduction. Okay. The Nachash is the serpent figure in Eden. The core question is simple. Who or what is the Nachash? And what happens if you stop assuming snake equals Satan equals liar and actually track the character? The character. Instead of letting later doctrine overwrite the story, as Roman Catholicism did, the plan here is to reopen the Eden file, follow what the text says happened, and then keep following that same figure as it reappears in later symbols, myths, and in Jesus' own words. Once that thread is visible, the gap between what the Bible shows and what Christianity has claimed about the serpent is hard to unsee. As we say all the time, once you see it, you can't unsee it. The assumed serpent villain. Most people never start with Genesis. They start with the slogan, "The serpent lied in Eden, God told the truth." And everything else is built on that untested claim. That assumption decides in advance who must be good and who must be evil. So any tension in the text gets flattened to fit the sermon. It also means anyone who sounds like the serpent, opening eyes, questioning a harsh God, will be treated as suspect by default, right? That's what's happening here. You think the snake is not Satan? How dare you? The first move, then, is to put that hand-me-down verdict on the table and ask how the story reads. If the serpent's words get the same hard scrutiny you'd use on anyone else, including me. Did that read right? And ask how the story reads if the serpent's words get the same hard scrutiny that you'd use on anyone else, including moi. All right? Reading Genesis as case, as in case law. Let's do it like that. That's probably why I didn't put it there. Genesis 2-3 can be read as a legal case, not a children's story. Two parties make opposite predictions about the same act, and the narrator calmly records the outcome: who died, who lived, whose words matched reality, and who introduced curse, exile, and blocked access to life. When you line up claim, evidence, narrator confirmation, and legal consequences, it becomes possible to see who functioned as a truth teller and who functioned as the source of harm. The serpent, the humans, and Yahweh all take positions. The point is to let the written record, not theology, decide which position holds. This is a text-first approach, right? What Christianity does is invents an idea and then isolates text in a Bible which is so massive, contains so many words, that you can make it say whatever you want. And this is what religious systems do. This is what Catholicism has done. We want to return to the text. We want to see what does the text say, because that, even according to Christianity, is supposed to be the basis of everything that we believe, right? But that's not how it works in reality. Religion comes up with ideas, and then it forces the text to fit those ideas, even adding verses to the Bible, as the Catholics did, to provide some evidence for the Trinity. They added a whole sentence to the Bible, not just a word, a whole sentence, to give the Bible some evidence of a Trinity, because it didn't have any evidence of a Trinity. And the greatest evidence against the Trinity is the fact that the Catholics had to add an entire sentence to the Bible in order to make it say something that it never did. And now you get these types that will say, well, the modern translations are removing all of these words and this sentence, and no. They're simply not including all the parts that your spiritual ancestors decided to add to the Bible, which are not in the actual manuscripts we translate from. Okay? Text-first approach. Text-first approach. We're going to track the Nachash through time. Once the Eden case is opened, the Nachash is not left in the garden. The same serpent healer pattern shows up in Enki's garden stories. This is in the Mesopotamian myths. Shows up in the bronze Nachash lifted in the wilderness. In Jesus identifying himself with that lifted serpent and naming a murderer from the beginning in the famous John 8:44 passage. And in the serpent staff of medicine that marks hospitals and ambulances today. At every stage, the serpent is associated with sight, knowledge, and healing on one side, and then religion brings in the other with fear, suppression, and demonization on the other. Following that line through history exposes how a figure tied to life and truth was gradually recast as your enemy. And this is, when we stop and think about it, that's exactly what we would expect from a lying murderer from the beginning, from the Genesis. Like when you step back and look at the big picture and you see the Holy One of God being turned into the devil and the devil being turned into the Holy One of God, you go, oh, wait, that's exactly what we would expect. Today, we correct the record, at least in part. This is just a tiny, tiny portion of the new Two Gardens and a Snake study, which I hope to release in January. Should be able to do it in January. We're going to keep churning through it here every week, all these little parts. And it's going to end up being, I mean, look, we can just, I don't want to lose my place here, but if we just zoom out, a lot of these are collapsed. A lot of these are not opened. But this is the Two Gardens and a Snake study. There's a little bit of data here to go through, right? And we want to go back. It always has this problem when I zoom right out. Can you stop? Okay, can we zoom in now? Okay. All right, don't slow down, please. Don't get all weird with me. All right. Before we go any further, we should talk with the Father. So let's do that. This is really going to challenge you. And, I've even got some people that have followed me, some people that are financial supporters, like these incredible people scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Thank you so very much. And Joy Owens just subscribed moments before we went live here. So your name is not on the ticker, but thank you so very much. You want to add your name to the ticker. This is monthly support. It's my bread and butter. It enables me to do what I'm doing. And I'm not a influencer. I'm not sitting on social media all day. I'm studying, and as you'll see here, there's a lot of work here. This is going to take us a long time to get through. These people enable me to quietly withdraw into the background and study. And I'm so honored because, how many people get that kind of break in life? So I appreciate every single one of you. But let's pray, because we need it right now. Father, we love you, and we thank you, and we thank you for your Son. We ask right now that you would deliver us from any imposter spirit that would be trying to influence us as we listen and learn today. We ask for the baptism of your Holy Spirit. We ask that you would come in and flood us with your Spirit, Abba Father. We ask that you would lift the veil from our eyes that is put there from reading the Old Testament. We ask that you would guide us in wisdom and knowledge and understanding and love as we go through the text, as we learn from history, as we be humble people trying to follow the evidence where it leads. We ask that you would protect us from error and deception today. I ask that as I speak, that your Holy Spirit would be speaking on my behalf. And we ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus. All right. We begin with scholarship and versus apologetics. Now, I made a post last night about this, and it's like there is a growing war. I haven't seen anyone talking about it, but it's just something I've noticed. I'm sure somebody has talked about it at some point. Between scholarship and apologetics. What is going on here? Is that spelled right? I am so tired. Apparently it is or it is not. I don't want to tell you the story about what happened last night and how much sleep I got. But anyway, scholarship versus apologetics. Let's dive in. I am a little tired. Sorry if I seem a little tired. All right. 3 worlds sitting on one word. Put the Eden story on the table, and 3 different worlds start talking. Critical scholars want to know what the Hebrew actually says and how that would have sounded to the first hearers. Christian apologists work backwards from a system where the devil is already fully formed and must appear in the garden. Most church people just carry a children's picture book idea of a talking snake and a moral story about disobedience. Same word on the page, 3 completely different Nachash in people's heads. So what I was saying here about scholarship versus apologetics is that you've got such a difference in how the text is read and interpreted by both camps. Whereas one camp wants to follow the evidence where it leads, and another camp wants to make the text fit in with their ideas no matter what it says. All right? So we want to know, well, what does it say? What does it actually say? The Nachash, snake, shining one, future speaker. Nachash is the Hebrew word in Genesis 3 that most English Bibles flatten into serpent. In normal use, it means a snake, but the same 3 letters are also used for words about bright, shining metal and about someone who can tell what's coming by paying attention to what's happening. Someone that watches the signs of the times. I think I say that later. The same way Jesus talks about knowing the seasons of his return by paying attention to what is happening around you. So Jesus says, these are the things that are going to happen before my return. You watch these signs. When you see these things happening, you know that other things are going to happen along with it. Which is one of the confusing parts that the preterist reinterprets when Jesus says, in Matthew 24, where Jesus is saying that, and these people will see the end, but he's talking about the people that will see the signs he just described, not his current audience. Put together, Nachash can hint at a snake, something shining, and a predictor of the future all at once. That fits the Eden Nachash, a bright, knowing figure with a serpent connection who talks about what will happen, not a farm animal that suddenly starts talking, okay? It's not a snake. It's not a snake. How scholars read the Nachash. Critical scholars start there and stay there. In Genesis, the character is always called Nachash, never Satan. There's nothing in the Bible that says the serpent in the Garden of Eden is evil, Satan, the devil, or anything like that. Yes, we know Paul reiterated the common Jewish idea that the snake beguiled, tricked Eve. And that's what Eve said. But we'll get into the story and we'll see that that is not accurate. The text calls him, the Nachash, we know it's a him, it uses a male pronoun, shrewd. Shows him speaking in clear sentences and then lets you watch his prediction play out. When scholars trace the word Satan through the Hebrew Bible, they see it begin as a role word for an accuser or adversary, and only much later drift toward a single enemy. The fusion of that later enemy with the Eden Nachash is treated as a later theological overlay, not something the Hebrew writer put into the garden. And the one classic way that we see the difference between scholarship and apologetics is because you have the apologist treating the Bible as a univocal work. They say, for instance, well, the Bible interprets the Bible. What? No. 66 books, at least in the Protestant canon, that are all different. And each one needs to be taken on its own merit, its own standing. And, you can't take a passage from the New Testament and say, well, this now redefines what is in the Old Testament. You can't do that. How apologists rewrite the Nachash. Christianity apologists begin with established dogma and rewrite meaning to fit. They already have a single Satan who must sit behind all temptation, so the Nachash cannot be allowed to stay as Genesis presents him. He has to be the devil in disguise, or their system breaks. Instead of asking who is the Nachash in this story, they glue disparate verses from various unrelated parts of the Bible into one long devil biography, and then copy-paste their Frankenstein creation back into Eden. We're not doing that today. Any hint that Yahweh lied, which he did, or that the Nachash told the truth, which he did, has to be flattened, because their conclusion is fixed in advance. They say God is always right, and they mean Yahweh. The Nachash is always lying. And the text must be twisted and distorted until it matches what the average church hands you. Most believers never hear of any of that. Let me just turn this spelling off. Where is it? I can't even see it. Where is it actually? Okay. Most believers never hear any of that. They don't hear that level of sophistication of the story at all. They grow up with a flannel graph Nachash, who is just the devil in snake form, a cartoon tempter in a tree, a simple rule from God, a simple act of disobedience, and a simple moral story that caused the downfall of humankind. No one explains that Nachash can also suggest brightness and future seeing, or that serious scholars and even loyal evangelicals, which we'll get into Michael Heiser here and what he has to say, because on these points, on many of these points, he was in full agreement with me. We don't agree on everything. Let's be clear about that. I think Dr. Michael Heiser was wrong about the majority of what he said about the divine council and what happened in the Garden of Eden. But in terms of the identity of the Nachash itself, I don't really find very much difference between what Dr. Michael Heiser saw and from what I teach. Okay? We align there at least. All that serious scholars and even loyal evangelicals deny that Genesis ever names this being Satan. It just doesn't do that. By the time someone is an adult, Nachash equals devil, and that's the end of the story. It feels like something the Bible said, when in fact it is something their religious system invented over time. And so, we go and spend time in a church and they just tell us all this stuff that is just their fantasy fiction story that has been made up over time. Starting with the church fathers and then just gradually over time, we just see this constant transition into this Greek metaphysical religion cult that we have today that we call, in general, Christianity. And if we could just get rid of all of that, if we could just stop at the Gospels and get rid of all this nonsense that came after, not all of it was nonsense, but a lot of it was, and just stayed with the Gospels, we'd have a very different, well, we might not have Christianity today. We would have people calling themselves Christians, but this idea of a religion called Christianity would hopefully not exist at all. That's what we want. We don't want a religious system. We want Jesus. Man, I bought a Costco chicken, roast chicken, rotisserie chicken, $5, cheapest protein you can buy. But I don't eat it very much, maybe once a year now. And I bought it this morning for breakfast, and the flavor enhancers are horrible in my mouth. That's why I don't buy it, but I needed something quick this morning. So, why the fight over one word matters? This is not a word game for specialists. It decides whose side you end up on. If Nachash is allowed to be what Genesis actually shows, a shining, intelligent figure whose prediction matches the outcome, then Yahweh is the one who steps in afterward with curse, exile, and death, with Jesus later undoing all that and restoring humanity to the same identical condition the Nachash wanted for them. We covered that a little bit last Sunday. If the Nachash is forced to be Satan no matter what, then the one whose words lined up with reality must be called the father of lies, and the one who imposed death must be called perfectly good. Well, that's ridiculous, but that is why this one Hebrew word will not go away. Nachash, we must understand this word. It sits right where the text and Christianity and the Christianity system tear apart. Let me read that again. That is why this one Hebrew word will not go away. It sits right where the text and the Christianity system rip apart. Okay? Words are important. We've got to start with what the text actually says. Heiser and McClellan. Dr. Michael Heiser, very famous Hebrew scholar, not a famous Hebrew scholar in the circles of Hebrew scholarship, but in evangelicalism he is. So Christians know about Heiser. But in terms of when we start to look at those that are serious critical scholars of the Hebrew text, there's a lot more individuals that are, I would say, at a higher level than Dr. Michael Heiser. Yeah, Dr. Michael Heiser is a wonderful man. I think he was wrong about almost everything he ever taught. But, that's just my opinion. But we certainly agree on some things. And so, we're going to lean on his identification of the Nachash here, because in this instance, I think he was right. He has something to say about it. Now, Heiser died about 2 years ago now. I think like two years and a few months ago. And there's a pastor whose monthly subscription just went through. We have pastors that support this work. Thank you so much. And then Dan McClellan is internet famous. He has a thriving YouTube channel where, as a scholar of the Bible, he constantly goes after the Christianity apologist. By the way, I use this term. I use the term Christianity a lot instead of Christian because I don't want to beat up on individuals. We're talking about a religious system here. right? I don't want to be saying the Christian, the Christian, the Christian. So you might say, well, shouldn't you say Christian apologist? I want to say Christianity apologists, because they are apologists not for individuals, but for a system, right? The system of Christianity, right? Remember, we have in the Bible, I think there's 3 times where the Bible uses the word Christian. But the word Christianity did not come into use for centuries later. 2 different things. And we get intentionally confused when we use this word Christianity, and then people, because I see it all the time, people say, no, the word Christian is right here in the Bible. Yes, the word Christian is, and it was a bit of an insult. People say, well, it means follower of Jesus. No, it doesn't. It means little Jesus, or little Christ, rather. And it was, most scholars agree that it was some form of a mild insult. It was like, let's say you follow a political candidate. I won't name any, but let's say you're crazy about this particular political person, right? Whether they're in office or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just some political figure. And, well, okay, we'll use Trump because that's like, Trump is the current president, all right? And let's say you're a Trump supporter, and someone who doesn't like Trump comes along and says, and if you don't like Trump, I'm completely neutral on Trump. I'm not pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I don't look at people like that. But somebody who doesn't like Trump comes along and says, you're a little Trump. They're not being complimentary, right? They're insulting you, okay? They're using it as a pejorative. And that's how Christian was first used, as a pejorative. Oh, you little Christs. And then later, Christianity was created. Well, Christianity is not in the Bible. There's no followers of Christianity in the Bible. It didn't exist when the Bible was written. We have Christians, but they were not followers of Christianity. Today, every Christian is a follower of Christianity. And that is a big difference, a semantic difference to what we have in the Bible, where none of those Christians in the Bible were following Christianity because it simply didn't exist. So Dan McClellan here, he's been saying a lot about this for a long time, just as I have. And so Heiser and Dan are in rough agreement with each other and with me on these things. Both of these are legitimate Hebrew scholars. And so I'm telling you this just so you can see that I'm deviating from apologists, but I'm not deviating from at least some Hebrew scholars. And because there's all different kinds of people in scholarship, we can't just say, well, scholars believe this on this topic. Some we can, it's that concrete, but not usually. But in this case, certainly the vast majority of Hebrew and Greek scholars, not theologians, not Bible teachers, not apologists, scholars, critical scholars, agree with my understanding of the Nachash in Genesis. I'm not getting it from them. I'm getting it from the text itself, but we're all in general agreement. Okay, there are some that don't agree, but they are absolutely in the minority. That doesn't mean they're wrong. Okay, we're not following consensus. Consensus doesn't mean anything. I'm simply telling you that what I'm telling you here about the Nachash is not some fringe thing. It is the standard scholarly position. All right, I think that's important to grasp. People will say, oh, he's coming up with all these ideas. No, I'm not. The majority, the vast majority of scholars agree with me on the identification of the Nachash in Eden. You will find some that disagree, but the majority agree. Even so, we're looking at Heiser and McClellan. Even inside the Christian and popular Bible world, the text keeps leaking through. The late Dr. Michael Heiser, who stayed firmly inside evangelicalism, argues that the Nachash is a divine council being. This is exactly what I say. A shining one in Eden described via serpent language. If we look at that, this is what Heiser says, right? And we can go all the way to here. I'm in 100% agreement with Dr. Michael Heiser here. He argues that the Nachash is a divine council being, a shining one in Eden described via serpent language. He's not a serpent, but he uses serpent symbology. There is serpent symbology attached to it. This is like his brand, okay? Like Nike. This is his brand, is the serpent. Not a barn snake with a human tongue. And Heiser openly admits Genesis never calls the Nachash Satan. This is standard scholarship. Dan McClellan goes further and says flatly that the Hebrew Bible never identifies the Eden Nachash as Satan, and that the New Testament does not clearly do it either. Both men from very different camps. These two guys, one is an evangelical, the other is a Mormon. Both very seasoned Hebrew scholars. Dan McClellan teaches Hebrew. Both men from very different camps end up saying the same thing. The Bible itself is silent on Nachash equals Satan. That link is something later readers lay on top. All right? We're going to be here a little bit today. Please go and share this study. If you're watching live on X, particularly, go and hit that retweet, reshare. I don't know why they got rid of tweet. Tweet sounds good. Works, right? Now, should we talk about streaming? No, we should keep going. But just so you know, we've got people in Australia and other countries where they, like in Australia, they're about to be enforced. I think it's from tomorrow. I think it's December 1st, or it's very soon anyway, where they have to provide photo identification in order to be able to use social media, including YouTube, including X. That's ridiculous, but that's the world we live in. Sometimes people say, well, they don't say it anymore. Actually, I haven't heard it for a very long time. But it used to be that Americans would say, why would you move here? Especially in Texas. Texas is not quite as nice as New Zealand, And New Zealand and Australia are pretty much the same. We're slightly different, but we're very, very similar. Just like Americans and Canadians, very, very, same language, mostly the same culture. And yet the governments down there, especially with the whole COVID thing, have just gone completely nuts, right? Completely nuts. So we need to work out how we stream this. We won't use X for streaming all the time because it just doesn't give access to everybody. Let's move on, though. We've got a lot to get through. Eden's shining Nachash. Eden's shining Nachash. 3 voices, 1 strange figure. How the Nachash first appears. The conversation we walk in on. 2 opposite predictions. What actually happens after they eat. Where death really comes from. What the Nachash actually does. Eden's Nachash as a legal test case. All right, let's begin. 3 voices, 1 strange figure. The garden story gives you 3 speaking characters, 3 that speak. Adam doesn't say anything here. The woman, Yahweh, and a strange being called the Nachash. Nachash is the Hebrew word most Bibles translate as serpent, but here he acts like someone far above the animals. He speaks clearly and talks about what will happen if they break Yahweh's command to eat the fruit. If you follow what the story actually shows, the Nachash looks less like a talking animal and more like an Elohim-level visitor inside Yahweh's garden, which wasn't originally Yahweh's garden. It was Jesus' garden, okay? I don't get into it in the study. It'll be in the larger two gardens and a snake, but Yahweh has taken over. There's been a transfer of power, of lordship over earth from Jesus to Yahweh. Yahweh was a higher rank. He pulled rank, and he took over control of the earth, okay? And so he took over Jesus' birthing centers. Like we see these birthing centers in Turkey, like Göbekli Tepe. And there's many more of these around the region where humans were created and educated and brought up to the level where they would then be relocated to where they were going to live. All the different human groups were created for the specific roles that they were going to play, what they were going to do, where they were going to be living and what would grow there and the environment and everything. Their skin type, like the Africans where the sun is harsh, were given black skin so they could tolerate that, where a Caucasian person absolutely could not. And, you know, every single people group was tailor-made for where they would live. They didn't evolve. They didn't migrate around the earth from one different people. We didn't all descend from the black Africans, though they were, in my opinion anyway, the very first people created. The black Africans, long, more than 100,000 years before white people were created. How the Nachash first appears. The story introduces the Nachash as more shrewd than any beast of the field that Yahweh had made, which immediately lifts him above the rest of the animals and quietly leaves him out of the list of creatures Yahweh is said to have created. So some Bible translations mistranslate this sentence because they want it to look like the Nachash is one of the included groups of animals that Yahweh had made. Right? We've got Yahweh's fake creation story. And he says, well, I made all the animals and brought them before Adam. Well, you know, we know because we've got the prior creation account. That didn't happen. But what the text here does is compares the Nachash to the animals Yahweh had made. It never says the Nachash is one of the animals Yahweh had made. And yet that is how many people read it, because I get this apologetic response all the time. But the serpent was one of the created animals by Yahweh. Text doesn't say that. Again, it's your theology that wants to read the text to fit your theology, right? It's not what the text simply says. The Nachash is compared to the animals that Yahweh had made. It never says it is one of the animals Yahweh has made. The grammar matters here. The phrase that, sometimes I forget, I've already got it written down. The phrase that Yahweh had made describes the beasts of the field, not the Nachash. So the Nachash is being compared to the animals Yahweh made, not named as one of them. Only the humans and the Nachash speak in the scene. And when the Nachash opens his mouth, he goes straight to what God said, what Yahweh said. And what will happen if that command is broken? Now, technically, it's Elohim, so we'll put Yahweh Elohim. We know it's Yahweh. There's only one Elohim in that garden story other than the Nachash, right? Let me pick up. And when the Nachash opens his mouth, he goes straight to what Yahweh Elohim said and what will happen if that command is broken. The opening line already tells you he is not normal wildlife. He is being compared to the animals, but he is not one of them. Now, if you've read that and you know that verse, you're going to be going like, wait, what? And you're going to go look it up and realize. Now here's something you can do. You can go to Like if you have a study Bible, you can look at the commentary in the study Bible if you've got enough notes there. Sometimes the notes are short, sometimes they're long. And if it addresses that verse, it almost guaranteed is going to try to make it sound like the Nachash is one of the animals that Yahweh Elohim made. But it's not. And then you could use, I don't know any scholarly resource until we create it, which we want to do and we're working on, to have a scholarly commentary that is more like a context note instead of a commentary. But you could ask an AI. You can go to any AI. It has, every single AI out there has the entire, history of published religious works, which is very helpful. And you can say, act as a critical scholar. Critical doesn't mean negative, right? It means someone who's very analytical. So ask the AI to act as a critical scholar, feed it that verse, and say what is going on here. The conversation we walk in on, the first words we hear from the Nachash sounds like we have joined the conversation halfway through. Did Yahweh Elohim really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? So we've walked in halfway through a conversation here. No intelligent being starts cold with a question like that. It sounds like the woman has already told him something about the rule. However it began, the point is clear. The Nachash already knows there is a command about the trees and now wants the exact wording so he can test it and push on it. Is the Nachash being evil yet? Let me know when we see it being Satan, right? 2 opposite predictions. Once the rule is on the table, you get 2 clear and opposite predictions about what will happen if they eat. Yahweh has said that on the day they eat from that tree, and the word there means a standard normal day. There's no 1,000 years equals a day and all this kind of nonsense that people bring in. That same word for day, Yom, is used elsewhere in Genesis and always means, not always, but especially in Genesis here, in the first few chapters of Genesis, always refers to a 24-hour day, a normal day. Okay, there's nothing weird, but again, your theology, you hear like, oh, well, I know they didn't die in the day, but 1,000 years is to a day like, they died spiritually, they died spiritually, right? Then they'd be dead. Deader than dead, right? Something that people that use that argument never think of. If they died spiritually, they wouldn't be talking, bucko. These arguments don't work. The Nachash says instead, they will not die, but their eyes will be opened and they will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. The story is setting up something very similar that most people never slow down to see. 2 different voices telling the humans what this act will do. Yahweh has told them that basically this is like a poisoned apple fruit. And if you eat it, you will surely die. When they eat, the story carefully lists what changes. They stay alive that day. They do not die. Their eyes are opened, just as the snake said. They suddenly see their nakedness and feel exposed in a way they never did before. When Yahweh arrives, he eventually says, the human has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, which is exactly what the snake said. Every detail matches what the Nachash said would happen. Opened eyes and Elohim level knowing. None of it matches Yahweh's threat of death on the day they eat. Where death really comes from. Death does not show up in the story as a poison in the fruit. It arrives when Yahweh delivers his sentence. He curses the ground, multiplies pain, tells the man he will return to dust and drives them out of the garden. Then he blocks the way to the tree of life, so they cannot keep eating from it and live on. In other words, mortality in this story is not a built-in result of listening to the Nachash. It is something Yahweh imposes afterwards and then enforces by cutting off access to ongoing life. They need, just as the Elohim do. This is something I don't think I can adequately prove from the biblical texts alone. Certainly if we look at other texts, we probably can get a lot closer to proving it. But the Elohim must consume the fruit of the tree of life periodically themselves, or they will die. And we see suggestions of this. We do see suggestions of this in the text, like when we go to Psalm 82, and we see the Father basically threatening his Elohim, saying, if you keep mistreating the humans, you will die like humans. Okay? We need to eat from the fruit of the tree of life to sustain our biological life. And that is what the resurrection of the dead is about. That's why we're being resurrected. We're not being resurrected to live in spiritual bodies. We're going to be in physical form. Otherwise, there's no point to any resurrection. We would only have to die again to be free from a physical body. And why Jesus restores us on the last page of the Bible to a garden with the tree of life. We'll get there. What the Nachash actually does, if you strip away all the later preaching and only look at the scene, the Nachash never harms anyone. He asks questions, challenges how they heard the command, and tells them what he says will happen if they eat. The humans choose to eat. They trusted the Nachash. The results match his words, the Nachash's words, and all the pain, curse, exile, and death come from Yahweh's response, not from eating the fruit. I mean, it was just a matter of time. I mean, we can grant Yahweh that he told them not to eat from it, and then they did. So they were disobedient towards Yahweh. The problem is that the Christian thinks Yahweh is God, and you shouldn't disobey God. Do you think that if Yahweh does this to his kids, just for argument's sake, that this would not have happened eventually some other way anyway? Like, who even does that? You've just created these humans. You've allowed, because you're supposed to be omniscient and omnipotent, how did this snake get in there? You obviously allowed him to, right? Or maybe you're not omniscient after all. Maybe you're not omnipresent after all, which is correct. None of these Elohim are omnipresent, omniscient, or omnipotent. The only damage Yahweh can charge to the Nachash inside the story is that he told the truth about what the fruit would really do. We're going to be here a long time today. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to get through. Maybe we'll break it into 2 studies. We've already been an hour here. Eden's Nachash as a legal test case. But don't you think it's interesting? Like right now, as I said earlier, I think I've got 20 to 30 hours of teaching to do on this general story. And it's not going to be exhaustive. I mean, there's easily a full-length book here. And I was thinking, once the God Wrestler is out, maybe we should publish a book as well. 2 Gardens and a Snake, and publish that as another free book so that everybody can read this whole story. I think we'll do that. Eden reads like a legal test without anyone saying the word court. It is so cold outside. 2 parties give opposite statements about the same act, and then the results are recorded so you can see whose words match reality and who actually brings harm. Once you let the story stand as written, the Nachash comes out as the one whose prediction proved accurate, and Yahweh comes out as the one who turned that act into a death sentence. That is the core problem most people have never been allowed to see. What the snake said came true, and Yahweh confirms it. And yet you hear all these Christians say, well, the snake lied in the garden. Yeah, it didn't actually. You might want to go read the story. Enki, the Nachash, and Jesus. Man. Now things get interesting. And they're going to get more interesting yet. Enki, the Nachash, and Jesus. Enki, the older pattern behind Nachash and Jesus. Enki, the wise protector. Garden of rivers and life trees. Serpents at the sacred tree. Enki against harsh law. From Enki to Eden's Nachash. From Enki to Jesus. The old story behind the names. All right. So who is Enki? Do I explain it here? Yeah. Long before anyone wrote Genesis, people in Mesopotamia told stories about a god called Enki, also known as Ea. He stands beside Anu and Enlil as one of the big 3 figures, but his role is different from the heavy-handed law gods. Enki rules freshwater and underground springs, is famous for wisdom and skill, and keeps stepping in to protect humans when stricter deities want them reduced or wiped out. If you already see Jesus as older than Yahweh and always moving to rescue us from bad rulings, then Enki's profile feels very familiar. Enki is the older brother of Enlil. Enki is the firstborn. And he has a very close relationship with his father, Anu. And then Enlil came along, who was born second. And yet because of the way their legal system is structured, became the new heir to the throne, knocking Enki out of first place. So now, before Enlil was born, Enki was the heir to the throne and sat at the right hand of his father. When Enlil was born and came of age, Enlil was given the right hand of his father, the right hand throne of his father, and Enki was demoted to the left hand side of his father. And this is no different from monarchies that we have today, where the heir sits at the right hand of the monarch, and the next in line sits at the left hand of the monarch. And these 3 are parallels of Abba Father, Jesus, and Yahweh. Enlil is Yahweh. Enlil got his position through the legal system. That's why he loves the law. Because he was born after the firstborn, but became the legal firstborn because of their legal code. So he loves the law. And he hates humans, just like Yahweh. Enki rules freshwater and underground springs, is famous for wisdom and skill, and keeps stepping in to protect humans when stricter deities want them reduced or wiped out. already read that. Let's move on. Enki, the wise protector. Again and again, Enki is the one who understands what is really happening and quietly moves to save life, particularly human life. And in these stories, he is credited for being the creator of the humans, working just like in the Bible, just like in Genesis chapter 1, where we see the divine council in session, the Elohim, and the same goes with Enki, who, with a divine council, with all the others, decided to create humans, but it was Jesus that did the actual creation of humans. And in the Mesopotamian story, it's Enki that does the actual creation of humans. These are the same figures through history, right? So when we look at the Bible today, some atheist critics will say the Bible's just copying these older stories. It's not really copying these older stories. It's just that, as I've been saying for a long time, it's the same one royal family all over the globe. Same royal family, all these different cultures, mythologies, which are just creative renditions of their history. It's all the same. We see the same main three figures and all of their other extended family all around the world. Whether we look at Hinduism in India with Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva, the Father, Jesus, Yahweh. Just we see in the Greek pantheon and in the Roman pantheon. So we've got Saturn and Jupiter and Neptune. We see these things over and over again, right? You've got Kronos and Zeus, which is Yahweh, and Poseidon, which is Jesus. You've got the main father who stays out of most human affairs. He's present, he is identified, but he's not in day-to-day stuff with humans. His two sons are. And those two sons don't like each other and butt heads a lot. It's the same story all over. Do we just ignore this? This is real data. This is real evidence. We're not dealing with a unique story. We're dealing with a story repeated through almost every culture around the world. So it's not that the Bible is copying from older stories. It's that it's the same royal family. So the stories are all there. The same stories are all there. When other gods decide on judgment, he warns humans in dreams, gives them plans. So when we look at the Noah's Ark story, the flood story, we see this whole story in the Mesopotamian culture as well. And it was, in this case, Enlil, Yahweh, who, before the council, gets everybody to agree that because a great calamity, a natural calamity that they could not stop, was going to come on earth. This is probably the Younger Dryas event that Graham Hancock talks about and other people now talk about a lot as well. It happened about 11,600 to 11,800 years ago. We've got that time period down pretty good. Enlil, before the council, said, we're done here. Let's allow the humans to perish in this natural event. So, the Bible says it's a judgment that Yahweh has against the earth. That's not what the older stories tell us. And he convinced the council to not inform the humans and to let them perish. And it was Enki, Jesus, who went to Ziasudra, Noah, and told him to build a boat. But because he agreed before Enlil that he would not tell Noah, not tell Ziasudra about what was coming, he didn't tell him exactly. The story goes that he had a mutual friend. He loved Noah very much. Noah was a friend of Jesus. And so he had a mutual friend tell Noah, Ziasudra, to come and lean up against a wall. And then Enki comes and leans up on the other side of the wall and talks to himself about what is going to happen and what somebody that wants to survive what is coming should do, with explicit instructions on how to build an ark, a boat, a vessel, to escape the floodwaters that are going to come. Enki is always rescuing people from Enlil. Jesus is always rescuing people from Yahweh. At first this is just like, but then when you sit with this for a while, you just like, you can't avoid all of these different connections. And some of them are so very precise in their alignment. There are differences, but you can see when you overlay them, like, okay, we're just looking at the same account from different witnesses. Just like we see in a court. 3 people saw a car accident. They all have 3 different testimonies. They all describe it differently. The color of the car, one says it's blue, the other says it's white, the other says it's red. They're not sure about little details here and there. But when we put those 3 testimonies together, we can see they're all describing the same event. Right? Just like the Gospels. Right? We've got the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They're all telling kind of the same story, and there are some differences. And I like those differences because it shows that people did not get together and say, hey, let's make sure all of our stories are all in agreement with each other. No. 3 different witnesses telling the same stories from 3 slightly different perspectives. When other gods decide on judgment, he warns humans in dreams, gives them plans, and helps them survive floods and plagues. He is not the one sending the disaster. He is the one bending the rules to keep a remnant alive. That mix of deep knowing, clever speech, and it's like, so Enki here is being very clever with the law, like what words were used here. I want to be very precise about the semantics and how we go about this. And that's exactly what Jesus does when he comes to fulfill Yahweh's law. It's wild. It's like really, really wild. That mix of deep knowing, clever speech, and stubborn mercy is exactly the sort of personality Christianity later tries to hide when it turns the serpent into a cartoon villain and paints Yahweh as the only possible rescuer. Garden of rivers and life trees. Enki's home is a good tended garden. Enki's home is a God-tended garden, watered by rivers flowing out from the deep water within the earth. You've probably heard about all of these discoveries. There's been multiple discoveries of these absolutely unfathomable pockets of water inside the earth, just like Genesis tells us about, right? And Enki is the god of the deep, the Absu, the abyss, the deep fresh waters of the earth, the clean, pure, fresh water. Enki's home is a God-tended garden watered by rivers flowing out from the deep, filled with life-giving plants and trees. The gods walk there, all of them. Death and disease are not part of this scene. Eden looks like that same world, a garden, a single river that becomes 4, and special trees that define life and knowing in the middle of it all. Genesis is not inventing this picture. It is working inside an Enki-shaped landscape, people already knew with different names. It's the same kingdom, the same royal family, all over the world, everywhere. Serpents at the sacred tree. Around Enki, you find serpent-linked figures beside sacred trees. One key example is Ningishzida, Lord of the Good Tree, shown in art as a human figure with serpents rising from his shoulders and tightly tied to justice, vegetation, and the doorway between worlds. In other words, serpent and tree together mark the place where divine wisdom and human fate meet. When Genesis places a hyper-aware Nachash right at the forbidden tree, talking about what will really happen if the fruit is eaten, it is using the same slot in the story that older cultures gave to Enki's serpent allies. It's a big family affair. Royal family. These people all know each other. They're all of the Father's house. Man, that stuff they inject into the chickens, just I'm not buying them again. Enki against harsh law. My mouth is so dry. In the older flood stories, it is Enlil that decides humans are noisy and disposable. He says they stink and they're preoccupied with sex. Yahweh does not like humans reproducing. Remember how Adam and Eve couldn't reproduce? Or maybe they could, but they didn't know. So he considers them noisy and disposable and orders their destruction. Enki quietly disagrees. He leaks the decision to a human, to Ziasudra, to Noah, gives building instructions, and finds ways to keep life going, even while the judgment rolls through. That legal clash, strict law and violent decree on one side, clever mercy on the other, mirrors the tension you see in Eden and later in the wilderness. One voice threatens death and curse, another voice works inside that system to keep humans alive. You know, there must be a point where you and many people, when you learn this stuff, and you just go like, why have I never heard any of this before? Like, this is too blatant to ignore, to just write off as silliness. These texts are older, much older than anything the Bible is translated from. Like thousands of years older. From Enki to Eden's Nachash. Once you know Enki's pattern, the Eden Nachash no longer looks random. A serpent at a tree in a divine garden, speaking about what the Elohim's command really means and what the future holds. Fits the older Enki story perfectly. The Nachash is not a devil popping up out of nowhere. He stands in a long line of serpent-linked wisdom figures who guard trees, tell uncomfortable truths, and help humans see what is actually at stake. Genesis keeps enough of that pattern for you to recognize it, but then tries to flip the moral verdict by blaming the serpent and praising the lawgiver. From Enki to Jesus. The same pattern surfaces again in Jesus. He brings living water, speaks with piercing wisdom, and refuses to side with the Elohim who calls down fire on villages or sends plagues on people. He steps into legal traps, the temptation, finds life-giving loopholes and tells people the truth about the Father they did not know. When he identifies himself with the lifted serpent and exposes the murderer from the Genesis, beginning in John 8:44, he is doing what Enki always did in those older stories, standing between a harsh decree and the humans under it and finding a way to save them, even at his own cost. The old story behind the names. Putting all this together, Enki looks like an older cultural memory of the same kind of being Genesis later calls the Nachash and the Gospels reveal as Jesus, a water and wisdom figure, serpent-linked, operating in a garden, working against deadly rulings to keep humanity alive. Enlil's role as strict Lord of Commands maps cleanly onto Yahweh. Anu's High Father place fits Abba. The names and details shift across cultures, but the basic cast stays the same. Why? You can't just write this off as nonsense or meaningless. There's no such thing as coincidence, right? Once you see that, the Bible's serpent and Jesus no longer feel like accidents or heresy. They look like the latest chapter of a much older story that has been trying to break through all along. We are focusing on one tiny little aspect of this larger story. You see how we're going to do 20 to 30 hours of teaching. There's so much here to talk about. It really is. Now let's talk about the bronze serpent inside Yahweh's law. And Jesus connects himself to this serpent. Why would you do that? And what actually happened to that serpent that Moses lifted up on a pole? And why did Yahweh tell Moses, of all people, to break his own law to save the humans? So we're going to look at the serpent image inside the law, dying camp in the wilderness, Numbers 21. Yahweh orders a bronze Nachash. A what? A bronze Nachash. A forbidden image that heals. Serpent symbol turned into an idol. Hezekiah erases the problem object centuries later. The law's serpent glitch. Now, this is so weird. This is one of the strangest parts of the whole Bible. And you have, unless you've been listening to me, you've probably never, ever heard of it before. Centuries after Eden, the Nachash shows up again in the middle of Yahweh's own legal system. Not as a tempter in a garden, but as a metal serpent on a pole in the wilderness. The scene in Numbers 21 has one job. It puts a serpent symbol inside Yahweh's law and where it does not belong, breaking his own command against images and yet bringing healing to anyone who looks at it. If you read it straight, this is a glitch in the system that never really gets resolved. We could just be here all day. There is so much to talk about. The story opens with a camp in trouble. The people are being bitten and killed by fiery serpents in the desert, and they know the attack is coming from Yahweh himself. They beg for rescue, not from random snakes, but from a deadly judgment sent by their own God, and the whole camp is desperate for a way out. Yahweh orders a bronze Nachash. Then something strange happens. The same God, Elohim, who sent the snakes, tells Moses to make a Nachash out of bronze and lift it up on a pole in the middle of the camp. In Hebrew, the words even echo each other. Nachash, serpent, and Nekoshet, bronze, tying the metal image directly to the serpent. This is like in the whole thing here, all of it in the Garden of Eden and now here in Numbers 21 is a play on words. The serpent is a symbol, a brand of an individual. And that's what is now being lifted up. that Nachash in Eden has the symbol, the brand of a snake, a serpent. Now that very brand is being lifted up to bring healing. The people have already been told not to make carved figures. Now Yahweh himself orders one. This is not just breaking one of the 613 commandments that Yahweh gave to the Hebrews. This is breaking the Decalogue, the 10 commandments. This is a really serious thing. Yahweh is breaking his own law, but he does that all the time anyway. He kills incessantly. Well, that's against his own law. That's against his own Decalogue, the 10 commandments. He is instructing Moses to break his law. And then everybody in the camp is instructed to break Yahweh's law. What's going on here? Why have you never heard about this? The people have already been told not to make carved images. Now Yahweh himself orders one, and the object he picks is a serpent. What? A forbidden image that heals. The command attached to this image is simple. Anyone who has been bitten and looks at the lifted bronze Nachash will live. No sacrifice is offered. No priestly ritual is performed. No blood is shed, except of the lives of those that have already died at Yahweh's hands. The only action is to look at the serpent image, and the result is healing. The same kind of being that was killing them becomes the channel of life when raised up in metal where everyone can see it. Yahweh in the garden says he will turn the humans against the serpent, the Nachash. So what we see through the story is Yahweh doing that. Yahweh sends poisonous snakes to kill his own people, as you do, right? And so he's turning people against the serpent. Now, there's a lot of missing context in the story. Well, wait, then how did this all happen? How did this come into play? Well, we can speculate, and I'm not going to here because we've got a lot to get through. But Jesus is around. The healer is around. It's a big royal family, right? Serpent symbol turned into an idol. The story does not end in the wilderness, this story. That bronze Nachash survives and is kept for generations until it becomes an object of worship in its own right. Well, it was already worshipped back. I mean, you can't elevate an image on a pole and then tell everyone to go and look up to it to receive healing and not call that worship. People burn incense to it, to the symbol that Moses lifted up, treating it like an Elohim. What started as a life-saving sign inside the law slowly turns into a rival to Yahweh in everyday religion, as if the people sense that this serpent image holds a different kind of power than the rest of Yahweh's system. Yahweh didn't go around healing people. So now they have this serpent that they're now treating like another Elohim, that they are giving offerings to and burning incense to, worshiping. And Yahweh is like, okay, we're done with this. And so King Hezekiah destroys it. Much later, King Hezekiah finally destroys the bronze Nachash, calling it Nehushtan. Basically, just a piece of bronze, and grinding it down to powder. In one move, he both smashes an idol and removes the most obvious contradiction in Yahweh's legal code. Why have you never heard any of this before? Right? It's not just, wow, what the heck? Why has this been concealed? You're a Christian and you've been going to church for a long time and you just want to know the story. You want to know what's going on. And you've never heard these things before. Why? That question, W-H-Y. Why? Did I say, yeah, W-H-Y? I'm a bit tired. That's got to be the question so many times here. Not just like the facts themselves, but why is there no consciousness of this amongst people? Why does nobody know these things? If you took some screenshots of these things and showed them to your fellow people at your fellowship, they'd think, that's not in the Bible. That's crazy. What is this? This is Gnosticism. Right? And then you look it up and you, oh, wow, it's actually all in my Bible. Yeah. Why is no one showing you? Why? So, in one move, he both smashes an idol and removes the most obvious contradiction in Yahweh's legal code, a serpent graven image, ordered by Yahweh against his law, telling everyone to break his law, that broke the no images rule and still worked. The problem is not solved. The evidence is simply taken off the table. Let's get rid of that pesky serpent. We don't want any Nachash in people's consciousness. We don't want anyone to know about the Nachash. Get rid of it, grind it to powder, let it be gone. When you step back, this whole episode looks like a legal glitch stitched into Yahweh's own system. A serpent figure who should be banned. He was cursed. He was cursed to the ground. Now Yahweh is saying, lift him up. Wait, I thought he was cursed to the ground. Now Yahweh is telling Moses, break my law, make an image of the Nachash that I cursed to the ground and lift it up on a pole so that anyone who looks upon it can be healed. What? Why have you never been told any of this before? But the story remains. Oh, hang on. I missed the line. A serpent figure, which should be banned, is commanded, raised up, and made the one thing that can save people from a judgment Yahweh himself sent. Now, what I think has happened here is Yahweh wanted to kill off more people. He's always killing off large swathes of people. Things got out of hand, and he could not control the situation. And the people cry out to Moses, and Moses cries out to Yahweh. And what does Yahweh do? He says, hey, bro, I need some help here. And somehow Jesus intervenes. You make a symbol of me. You put it on a pole and let people look at it, and they will be healed. I can't do that. I gave them law at Sinai, and can't do that. Like that's against my law. That breaks the law in so many ways. I would be breaking my own law. Moses would be breaking my law. How could he enter the promised land if he broke? Is that why he wasn't allowed to enter the promised land? Does it all come back to this? Maybe it didn't have anything to do with tapping a rock with a stick. Maybe it had to do with Moses cooperating with the Nachash to build the Nachash symbol, the Nachash Nikoshet, and bring healing to the people. Moses knew Jesus. There's so many connections here that have never been talked about before. Later generations can't live with that tension, so the object is destroyed and downgraded to just bronze. But the story remains, silently showing a serpent image inside the law, acting as a healer, not killer, and exposing a crack in the claim that Yahweh's commands are simple, consistent, and unbreakable. Yahweh tries to set the serpent against the people like this, and then the craziest thing, too many die, and that very Nachash says, wow, you were trying to set them against me, now you're going to have to show them who I am and what I can do for them. What? Like, for real? But there's more. There's so much more. We'll just keep going. We'll make this a very long study today. Actually, I need to make sure I'm not running out of disk space. Well, we should be good for another hour. Can you hang in there for another hour? Of course you can. You can just pause it and come back if you need to. So now we're going to talk about the serpent healer across history. It's not just Enki. It's not just Numbers 21 with the Nachash being lifted up, the bronze serpent, the shining serpent being lifted up on the pole. It's all through history. Serpent staffs on the road to the hospital. This is very relevant to what's happening with COVID and with all of the medical tyranny that's going on. This whole inversion where once again Yahweh is trying to turn people against the snake. And what should be a system of healing is becoming a system of death. Once the bronze Nachash is raised in the wilderness, the pattern does not stop. The same serpent as healer picture shows up again in Greek religion and then in the very symbols of modern medicine. You see serpent staffs on ambulances and hospital signs, even while churches preach that the serpent is Satan. The symbol kept its healing role, but the story around it was rewritten. That is what keeps happening. We are constantly subjected to what Yahweh said he would do. I will turn you against each other. I will turn you and the humans against each other. And it's not stopping. It's with us to this very day. Asclepius and his serpent staff. In Greek stories, the healer god, Asclepius, walks with a staff that has a single serpent coiled around it. Numbers 21. It is the Nachash Nikoshet. It's the same thing. For the people who prayed to him, the snake was not a liar or a tempter. It was a sign of renewal and recovery. Serpents shed their skin and survive venom, so they made sense as living pictures of sickness turning into life. Temples of Asclepius were places where the sick came, slept in the sanctuary, and looked for dreams and signs that would tell them how to get well under a banner that put a serpent at the center of healing. The rod of Asclepius in medicine. Over time, that staff with one serpent, called the rod of Asclepius, became the main picture for medicine in the Greek and Roman world. It's all one big family. A staff means support. The serpent means life that can face poison and survive, and together they say, here is where you come for help. When later medical groups went looking for a symbol, they lifted that same image. Long before most people ever read Numbers 21 or thought about the bronze Nachash, the snake on a staff was already the international badge for this is where the healers are. It's just wild. Like, this is not fantasy. This is our human history. Let's see. Caduceus mix-up and double serpents. Later on, things get muddled. Another Greek figure, Hermes, carries a different staff called the caduceus with two serpents and wings. In his case, a badge of trade, travel, and messages, not medicine. In the last couple of centuries, especially in the US, officials and companies started confusing the two, slapping the double serpent caduceus on medical logos by mistake. That mix-up spread everywhere, so today you see both the single serpent rod and the double serpent caduceus on clinics and uniforms and ambulances, all saying health in the public mind, even if the history is a little scrambled. So it started off as a single serpent, and then there was some confusion from people that, weren't scholars of these things, and that's fine. It's not a big deal, but it is interesting to know. Serpent signs on hospitals and ambulances. If you pay attention on the road, you still see this everywhere. Ambulances, emergency rooms, army medic patches, pharmacy signs. Again and again, it is a staff with a snake, a serpent, wrapped around it. Nobody at the front desk is thinking about Eden or Numbers 21. They just know this is the healing symbol. Ordinary believers will sit through sermons about the serpent of Satan, then drive straight to a building marked with a serpent staff when they need help, never noticing the clash. The picture that was once lifted in a desert camp now rides on the side of the vehicle that rescues you from calamity. When healing, institutions turn predatory. There is a darker side to this. And most of you following me are kind of in my camp on this, and so this isn't news to you. But we should see how it fits into this bigger picture, this bigger story. There is a darker side to this, and you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see it. The same institutions that carry serpent staffs as signs of help have, at times, been hijacked by people and systems that cause massive harm under the name of medicine. From open atrocities like forced experiments, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and sterilizations to modern patterns where profit, power, and politics are put ahead of patients. Oh, I don't see that anywhere. Do you? In those moments, a symbol that once meant you can trust us to heal you is used to front for practices that sicken, disable, or kill people who thought they were safe. Oh yeah, no, that doesn't ring any bells or anything. It looks again like a good serpent image being turned into its opposite. Most of us have a very healthy level of skepticism about going to doctors or hospitals or anything like that. Like if I was bringing a child into the world, the last place it would be in a hospital. Unless, of course, there is some medical emergency and you're going to stay very close and make sure nothing gets administered that should not be administered. And I don't think anything has exemplified this more than what we've gone through the last 5 years. It's almost 6 years now. It's just crazy. Yahweh is always turning people against the snake. In Revelation, we see the pharmaceutical industry called out. This is something where, as we move through time and into the events that are being discussed in Revelation, they make more sense. And so there's a Greek word that has been translated as spells, spellcraft, witchcraft, sorcery. And it says that the business magnates, the business leaders of the world have used sorcery, witchcraft, spellcrafting to deceive the world. But that word being translated as sorcery, witchcraft, is actually pharmakia. Can't make this up. Pharmakia, which is the root for pharmaceuticals, pharmacy, pharmakia. Always turning people against the healer. Serpent healer thread through the ages. Seen as one story, the line runs straight. A Nachash in Eden telling the truth about what will happen. A bronze Nachash in the wilderness that heals anyone who looks upon it. A Greek healer with a serpent staff. In our own ambulances and hospitals, carrying serpent signs. Again and again, the serpent is tied to healing and life. And while religious systems try to brand him as the enemy, all these religious systems that say Yahweh is God, the Father, or the Son, they can't make up their mind. To me, it's just becoming very clear what's going on. We are being conditioned so strongly, I mean, it's been incredibly successful, to view the very one that loves us and cares about us and wants to heal us as our enemy. Again and again, the serpent is tied to healing and life, even while religious systems try to brand him as the enemy, while some modern healers betray the trust that symbol asks for. The picture of the serpent healer survives, but who you are told to fear and who you are told to trust keeps being flipped. It was flipped in the garden, it just keeps being flipped. There is so much going on in this story, right? Jesus reclaims the serpent role. Now this is all interesting, but this is just wild. Jesus steps into the serpent story. Jesus and the bronze Nachash, lifted up for sight and life, taking the venom into himself, naming the real murderer. True eye-opening Nachash, serpent healer revealed in the sun. Are you having a good time? Hour and 50 minutes in, and we've still got quite some time to go. You can see why we're going to take 20 or 30 hours to get through all of this. Jesus steps into the serpent story. When Jesus talks about his death, he does not reach for a lamb, a lion, or a temple sacrifice. He reaches straight for the most controversial image in Israel's history, the bronze serpent in the wilderness. Why? By saying the Son of Man must be lifted up as Moses lifted up the serpent, he walks right into the serpent healer pattern and stands there on purpose. And he talks about being lifted up 3 times, not a one-off. In full view, and stands there on purpose, in full view of Yahweh's law and the people who hate the serpent image. What do you think his Hebrew listeners thought? You didn't know about the serpent, and in Numbers 21, how it persisted and was worshipped, and incense was offered to it, and was in a temple, and people were coming in and worshiping it, and then it was ground to dust so that it couldn't be anymore, relating back to Yahweh saying, from dust you came, to dust you'll return. And now Jesus says to them who do know that story, who do know the details, these are the religious teachers, they know all this stuff, and says, as Moses lifted up the Nachash Nekoshet, so the Son of Man will be lifted up, and he will draw all men unto himself. Why have you never been told this? Like, imagine what's going through their minds when they hear this. For you to hear it, just, you don't have the context. You don't know yet. They did. So this is a wild thing Jesus is saying to them. Wild, wild thing. Jesus and the bronze Nachash. In John 3, Jesus tells Nicodemus, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. He was one of the most famous teachers in all of Israel. He knew exactly what Jesus was talking about. Jesus tells Nicodemus that just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, so that everyone who believes may have life. He could have compared himself to the Passover lamb or to a priestly sacrifice, but he didn't. He chose the bronze Nachash instead, the Nachash Nikoshet. That choice ties him directly to the object Yahweh once instructed to be made as a healer inside, and yet breaking his own law, the very serpent image later crushed to dust. Like, you got to wonder, like, when you start learning all these details, and you know, you've got this basic general Christian story in your head, and you go like, wait, this is just starting to throw everything out of order. Like, hang on, wait, stop. Like, all of this data, like, I've never heard these things, but these things are clearly important. Jesus is the one talking about them. He likens himself to this, and that's what happened. They kept it, and they worshipped it as an Elohim, and they gave sacrifices, like, not sacrifice, but offerings. Well, you can call it a sacrifice, but not a living not killing an animal. Burning incense before it, and infuriated Yahweh that King Hezekiah destroyed it. Dude. Right? Lifted up for sight and life. In the wilderness, the bitten Israelites only had to look at the lifted bronze Nachash to live. There was no ritual, no payment, just a look. In Jesus' mouth, the same pattern returns, looking to the one who is lifted up. Trusting him becomes the way to step out of the venom of Yahweh's judgment and into redemption. The cross functions like that pole in the camp, the place where people face what they had been turned against, the serpent, and where they discover that the lifted figure is for their rescue, not their ruin. Wow. You know, this is just preliminary. We're just going over some of the basics here, right? We're not really going into, like, I'm not even citing all of the verses and reading them out. This would be hours longer if we were to just explore the evidence, but we will do that in the larger series. Taking the venom into himself. There is a sharp reversal here. In Numbers 21, Yahweh sends the serpents and then orders the bronze Nachash as a workaround. On the cross, Jesus steps into the serpent role, but does the opposite of Yahweh. He does not send the venom. He takes it into himself. He's the one that takes all of the curse of the law, the curse of everyone's shortfallings, their sin, upon himself. The innocent one allows the full weight of law, curse, and death to land on him, turning the execution device into a healing sign. The snake, the poisonous snakes, the execution device gets turned into a sign. The cross is an execution device. Now it's turned into a sign of life and healing. Are you serious? Are you serious? Why has nobody told me all this before? Like, I didn't read this in a book somewhere. There's no book that I'm aware of that you can go and learn any of this. This is my life. Just passionately studying the text to peel away all of the layers to see what's really there and connecting all of the dots across time, across history. Freak, it's wild. The innocent one allows I read that. Legally, he stands where the serpent stood, raised up as the point of contact, but he is the one absorbing the poison rather than unleashing it. Naming the real murderer. Later in John 8:44, Jesus talks about a murderer from the beginning, from the Genesis, and the father of lies. Now, the reason I say Genesis, I don't explain it here, I don't think. But the word Genesis in the Hebrew, Bereshit in the Hebrew, means beginnings. So when Jesus is saying to the religious people that your father, your Elohim, is the lying murderer from the beginning, he is referring to Genesis. Oh, wow. Jesus talks about a murderer from the beginning and the father of lies, and he says plainly that this is the father of his opponents, the religious, not his father. Once you have read Genesis 2-3 closely, the question is unavoidable. Who actually lied and who actually brought death into that story that Jesus is pointing to? It was not the Nachash whose prediction matched the outcome and who never killed anyone. It was Yahweh who threatened death, blocked the tree of life, and drove the humans out. Jesus' words quietly point back over his shoulder and expose who really fits the title, murderer from the Genesis beginning. The true eye-opening Nachash. In Eden, the Nachash promised that the humans' eyes would be opened, and the text says that is exactly what happened. Jesus carries that eye-opening role forward in a different way. He literally opens blind eyes in his ministry, heals people all over the place. And he also exposes the truth about Yahweh, the law, and the systems that claim to speak for Abba. So, the Nachash in the garden corrects Yahweh. Yahweh said this. Did Elohim really say that? Like, what did he say? Oh, that won't happen. That's not the truth. I will tell you the truth. The truth is you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil if you eat that fruit. So the Nachash is the one who corrects the record on Yahweh in Eden. Jesus, the one who connects himself with the Nekoshet in Numbers 21, is doing exactly the same thing that the Nachash in Eden did. In him, Jesus, the Eden serpent's old function is fulfilled without a curse from Yahweh. Jesus is the true Nachash who opens eyes and leads people into life, not the one who blinds, shames, and kills. Serpent healer revealed in the Son. Put together, Jesus is not running away from the serpent. He is reclaiming the role that religion tried to erase. Yahweh has tried to erase. Yahweh said he will set humanity against the Nachash. And that has not slowed down. He is reclaiming the role that religion tried to erase. He steps into the place of the lifted Nachash, takes the venom of Yahweh's system into his own body, names the real murderer and liar in Eden, and turns the serpent healer pattern into a clear picture of himself. The very image Christians were taught to fear becomes, in Jesus' own words, the frame for understanding how he brings sight and life to anyone who dares look at him instead of the Elohim who sends snakes instead of fish. And it's the same today as it is in Numbers 21 for those people who would have been reluctant to even listen to Moses and what he was saying. You have to go and you have to build this. You have to help me build. No, we can't do that. That's against the Decalogue. That's against the law. We can't do that. No, but Yahweh has said we must. What? And then all these people, once that's done, you now have to come and look up at this graven image we just made. They're like, are you out of your mind? If we do that, we break the law. Yahweh will kill us. And now you've got the same thing going on with all the religious people around you. Your pastor, Bible teachers, your favorite apologetic influencers on YouTube and everywhere else saying, you can't look at the snake. You'll break Yahweh's law. But if you want healing, if you want life, then we must. Jesus reclaims the serpent role. Now, what about this thing in Revelation about the dragon, right? Doesn't it say there the serpent is going to be tossed into the pit? Well, this is all wrong, obviously, because, Revelation 12:9 talks about the serpent being tossed into the pit. Does it? When you go and read there, Revelation 12, verses 8 and 9, you can start a little earlier even for context, and you'll see that, I think in verses 8 and 9, it uses a Greek word, Draco, 4 times. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. It uses this Greek word Draco, which is our word dragon. And it's funny, the conversations I've had with people over the years about this passage, they'll go, but it says serpent. But John, the author, the writer of the Revelation, used the word Draco 4 times before that word ophis, which we translate as serpent, to give you context on who he's talking about, and that he's not talking about the serpent in Eden. Because nowhere is there any connection between the serpent in Eden, the serpent in Numbers 21, to a dragon. But Yahweh has connections to the dragon. Yahweh talks about himself like a dragon. Yahweh appears to have a dragon, a pet dragon. Let's explore the next section. The dragon is not the Nachash. Now, if I didn't need to explain this on this topic, I wouldn't include it here. It's a little annoying because we kind of have to go off on a tangent. If you would just recognize that Draco is used 4 times, and we have instances of what this connects to in the Old Testament, has nothing to do with that serpent, the Nachash that we're talking about, is another reptilian creature that is being discussed that has only connections to Yahweh and evil, then it would just be obvious and we wouldn't have this conversation. But because of Christianity, that specifically Roman Catholicism and all of its reformed offshoots, that have said, no, this is talking about the snake in Eden. And literally 100% of Christians believe this. And it's wrong, and you're being misled. Let's dive in. The dragon is not the Nachash. We're going to look at 2 different serpents, one sloppy fusion. Different words, different cultures. The Bible's dragon, Leviathan, and the sea monsters. Yahweh with dragon traits and a pet monster. No joke. Dragon behavior versus Eden's Nachash, because nature and character, behavior, is how we distinguish one from another, not by names. Remember, Jesus said we'd know them by their fruit, not their names. Okay? The dragon as accuser and law enforcer. Dragon as mask for Yahweh's violent power. Why dragon equals Nachash fails and putting the dragon back where it belongs. So here we're going to get into a little kind of interesting stuff on, we'll go through it all. If you listen to most preaching, you would think the talking Nachash in Eden and the dragon in Revelation are just the same bad guy in two costumes. The text does not support that at all. Genesis gives you a clever, truth-speaking Nachash in a garden. Revelation gives you a multi-headed, star-smashing, baby-hunting dragon. Those are two different serpents, both reptiles. When we look at serpents and dragons all through history, as they're carved and drawn, you see it's like a massive, big, winged serpent. So they're both serpents, but they're not both snakes, and they're not both dragons. They are different one from another. Revelation gives you these are two different serpents. When you keep them separate, the Revelation dragon lands on Yahweh's side of the story, not on the side of the serpent, who opened eyes in Eden and healed the wounds caused by Yahweh. What is the time? Oh, it's getting late. I'm going to run out of sunlight soon. Different words, different creatures. We haven't done a study this long in quite a while. Huh? I hope you're still with me. You can watch this in parts. Maybe you have. Different words, different creatures. In Genesis 3, the Hebrew word is Nachash, the Eden serpent. When the story was translated into Greek, the Nachash became an ophis, a snake. Revelation 12, by contrast, calls the enemy a drakon, a dragon. 4 times to drive the point home that this is something different to Eden, where there is no dragon connection whatsoever, of no kind, except they're both reptiles. Oh, what was I going to say? No, I already said it. So when we look at, if you just go on to Google, whatever search engine, and you look for, images of ancient dragons, you'll see that a dragon is not like a T-Rex with wings. A dragon is like a massive, massive serpent, not like a snake where it's all uniform from, top to tail, but still, like all the Chinese dragons, for example, like this big, slithery dragon, wings, feet, not the Nachash in Eden, who, by the way, was cursed to the ground. So the dragon has feet, and so we're talking about two different things. Dragon language comes from the big chaos monster tradition, not from Eden. The picture is of a sea dragon that tears up sky and earth, not a single serpent sitting in a tree and talking about a fruit. The Bible's dragon, Leviathan, and the sea monsters. Long before Revelation, the Hebrew texts talk about dragons. Leviathan shows up as a twisting, many-headed sea monster that God, Yahweh, crushes in battle. The word tanin is used for great sea beasts and dragon-like creatures in the deep. These scenes echo the older Near Eastern myths where the high god fights a chaos serpent and wins. This is not the Nachash. This is a big creature, very different. Or we would see all of these other Nachash stories talking plainly about a dragon. That would be the plain way to identify them all. Instead, there is total omission. So this dragon we're talking about, that is the Bible's dragon. The roaring seas, smashed heads, cosmic war, not a quiet conversation in a garden between a woman and a Nachash. Yahweh with dragon traits and a pet monster. Those same texts sometimes give Yahweh dragon traits. His breath pours out like smoke. Fire shoots from his mouth. And the earth shakes when he comes in anger. He's a big, heavy creature, not a snake. Elsewhere, Leviathan is not just an enemy, but a creature Yahweh made to play in the sea. It's his pet that he controls, just like he can possess a human, he can also possess an animal as well and speak through that animal. So you have an Elohim who both fights the dragon and keeps a dragon, Yahweh. There is nothing here about the Eden Nachash. The profile is fire, storm, battle, and giant sea beasts that answer to Yahweh. This is not the Nachash in Eden. Dragon behavior versus Eden's Nachash. Now stack the behaviors. In Genesis, the Nachash speaks, gives a prediction, and never harms anyone. His words match the outcome, and death only enters when Yahweh curses, blocks the tree of life, and drives the humans out. In Revelation, the dragon tries to devour a child the moment it is born, hurls stars from the sky, wages war in heaven, chases the woman, vomits out a flood, and empowers beasts that torment and kill. One character is a truth teller whose words are confirmed by the actual story. The other is a mass killer tied to cosmic slaughter and empire. That is not one being evolving over time. These are opposite roles. But they will twist any passage they can to satisfy their theological fantasies. The dragon as accuser and law enforcer. I need to take a short drink. I mean, you learn all this stuff and you just think, like, how much more is there? I have 5 or 6, 7 years of content to study and bring to light. And that's just what I can see now today. Imagine what more I'm going to see as time continues. There is just so much. The dragon is accuser and law enforcer. Revelation calls the dragon the accuser of our siblings, the one who charges them day and night before Theos, before the Father. That is a legal prosecutor, not an advocate for the accused. In the older text, because the Nachash in the garden was an advocate for the accused. Did you notice that when the Nachash comes into Eden and talks to Adam and Eve and gets them to eat the fruit, the Nachash waits around. The Nachash does not leave, does not abandon Adam and Eve, doesn't leave nor forsake them, but remains with Adam and Eve to face the music from Yahweh. What? So this great Satan that is deceiving Adam and Eve gets them to eat. Now their eyes are open. Now they can see their nakedness. They now have self-awareness. And the Nachash doesn't flee. It doesn't get out of there. It's not afraid of Yahweh. But it stays with Adam and Eve and confronts Yahweh. What? I should have had that earlier in the study somewhere. Explain that, please. How does that make the slightest bit of sense? Satan just decided to hang around until God turns up? The more you know, the more you see, the more you see. It's just, it's like a snowball effect. It just this whole thing just never ends. You learn one piece of information and you realize, oh wait, oh that connects to all these other. This is why my theology makes sense of lots of passages throughout the Bible that Christianity has got no clue how they function, how they work, how they fit together. Because their story is wrong. And I'm not saying my story is right, but we're being diligent and sincere about understanding, growing into the evidence, right? Like putting the evidence on like a garment until we start to see things, until wisdom and knowledge and understanding arrive. It's only through immersion that you get wet. The dragon as accuser and law enforcer. Oh, we read all this? Did we not finish it? Let's read it again. I think I only read the first line. Revelation calls the dragon the accuser of our siblings, the one who charges them day and night before Theos, the Father. That is a legal prosecutor, not an advocate for the accused. The Nachash was an advocate for the accused. He stayed with them. He represented them. He faced the music alongside them. Who's our advocate in the New Testament? Jesus. In the older text, the title the Satan, or Hasatan in Hebrew, is used for an accuser in the divine council. And Yahweh himself often functions as prosecutor and judge, bringing charges, handing down sentences, and sending plagues and armies. The Eden Nachash never accuses anyone of anything. Yahweh does. The Revelation dragon fits the pattern of a law-enforcing, life-destroying accuser much more than it fits the quiet Nachash who simply speaks and lets the humans decide. There's no similarity here between the nature and the character of the dragon to the Nachash. There's no match-up at all, except they are both reptiles. When Revelation fuses dragon, serpent, accuser, and devil into one image, it is pulling from the chaos monster stream, the legal accuser stream, and the long history of an Elohim who uses beasts and empires as weapons. That profile matches Yahweh's record. Floods, plagues, sea monsters, war on nations. Far better than it matches the Eden Nachash. If Yahweh has already stepped into the role of the Satan, the accuser and adversary, then the great red dragon looks like his violent power finally unmasked, not like an upgraded version of the wise Nachash from Eden. It is Yahweh's dragon. And I think we've got, some people don't believe in dinosaurs, which I think is interesting. But, I mean, because we have dinosaur bones with, that still have, like, they're not millions of years old, obviously. They're pretty recent. We have soft tissue that we can extract from dinosaur bones, which simply wouldn't be the case if they were millions of years old. These were animals that Jesus had created to rapidly terraform the earth, eat tremendous amounts of vegetation, poop everywhere, create good soil. We're generating a biosystem with these animals, these large animals. So I think the dragon is real. I don't think the dragon is a fictitious thing. The dragon is across multiple different cultures all around the world. When They didn't have the internet. So, yeah, in my opinion, dragons were real living creatures. And who knows? Maybe we're going to see one soon. Why dragon equals Nachash fails. Apologists need dragon to equal Satan and to equal Eden, serpent, to keep their system clean. One villain from Genesis to Revelation. One simple story. To get there, they erase the differences between a garden Nachash and a chaos dragon. Ignore the Leviathan tradition. Ignore how often Yahweh himself acts and describes himself like a dragon and a dragon master, and pretend that the only thing that matters is the word ophis, or serpent, used in both places. Dracon. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. John is really trying to drive something home. Once you follow the language, the imagery, and the behavior, that fusion collapses. The dragon belongs with Yahweh's side of the conflict. Violence, accusation, sea monsters, empire. Not with the serpent who opened eyes and never killed anyone. The dragon kills, it's a murderer. Putting the dragon back where it belongs. When you stop forcing the Eden Nachash and the Revelation dragon into one costume, the picture clears. The garden serpent stays what the story showed him to be. A knowing, speaking being whose words came true and who never lifted a hand against the humans. The dragon in Revelation stands out as the face of the same destructive power that has been crushing, accusing, and devouring from the beginning through Yahweh. Now dragged into the light and judged. One serpent opens eyes and heals when lifted up. The other tears worlds apart. Treating them as the same being is not reading the Bible. It is protecting a lie called Christianity. The dragon is not the Nachash. End of story. Last one. Should we pick this up in another video, or should we just keep going a little bit longer? Boy, it's a long video. This is going to be longer than 2 gardens and a snake. And this is just on one character of the whole story. There is so much more to get through. Let me just check my disk space. Oh, I am getting low. All right. I should have bought a computer with more. You can't upgrade these things. It's crazy. I've got to buy a new computer just because I'm recording super high quality archival quality files, and so they take up an absolutely staggering amount of disk space. Let's finish. Choosing the true healer. Just like Jesus said, you can't serve 2 masters. Right? Can we make that render properly? 2 healers, 2 stories. Text against traditions story. Worshipping liar, fearing liberator. Serpent thread in our world and alignment with Abba's healing. By the time you've walked from Eden to Revelation, you're not just collecting trivia about serpents. You're staring at 2 completely different powers. One threatens, curses, and kills while hiding behind religion and institutions. And they do the same thing. They all act like Yahweh. Notice when you see all these people talking to me about light or talking about me, they all sound like clones of each other. They all sound exactly alike. Why is that? Because it's the same spirit behind all of them. The other opens eyes, takes the venom into himself, and keeps showing up wherever real healing breaks through. you don't get to stay neutral between those two stories. You end up trusting one and excusing the other. And this is why Jesus told us we cannot serve two lords, for we will love one and hate the other. And in that story, it's clearly talking about Yahweh versus Jesus. Jesus is talking about Mammon, the lord of money, the one that offers wealth and prosperity in this life in exchange for worship. Yahweh, just like he did in the temptation with Jesus. The text against tradition's story. If you sit down with the actual narrative of Genesis and John and just let them speak, they point one way. The Nachash tells the truth and harms no one. Yahweh introduces death, and Jesus later steps into the serpent healer role to pull people out of that system. Christian tradition points the opposite way, insisting that the serpent is the villain and that Yahweh is the perfectly good father Jesus reveals. Well, you can't reveal a father they didn't know if it's Yahweh. That doesn't... Anyway, there's a million things we could say about that. You can't give your loyalty to both. So you have to decide whether you will bend the text to keep the tradition, or let the text expose what the tradition has been lying about who does what. Worshipping liar, fearing liberator. Most of us were trained from childhood to worship the lawgiver who threatened death and blocked the tree of life, and to fear the serpent-shaped figure who keeps bringing sight and rescue. We were told to sing to the one who sends plagues and call it justice, and to recoil from the one who says, "Look to me and live." Whether in bronze in the wilderness or crucified on a cross outside Jerusalem. When the healer keeps arriving in serpent imagery, and the killer keeps being protected by theological spin, you are watching a long campaign to make people love their jailer and mistrust their liberator. We have a modern term for that, right? Stockholm syndrome, or trauma bonding. The serpent thread in our world. Once you notice the serpent healer thread, it won't go away. You see it in the bronze Nachash, in Asclepius' staff, in the serpent on the side of an ambulance, in every place where a symbol of healing stands at the gate of real care, and sometimes at the gate of deep corruption, people trying to reverse what it means, taking it from life to death. The same pattern shows up again and again. A sign that once meant you can trust us to help gets hijacked by systems that profit from keeping people sick or powerless. I mean, now, you have to get an advocate in the medical world. If you're in hospital, if you've got some problem and you're going to be involved in that system, then people now hire advocates, people that know the system, to come alongside and guide them through it. That's how corrupt it can be. That is what it looks like when Yahweh's kind of power turns people against the Nachash again, using fear, slander, and half-truths to keep you from recognizing who is actually on your side. Align with Abba's healing. At some point, you have to decide whose hands you are willing to fall into. The call here is not to chase serpent symbols for their own sake, but to align with the spirit of Abba and the Nachash-like Son who heals, uncovers, and tells the truth, even when it tears religious stories apart. That means refusing to bow to any Elohim, church, or institution that uses healing and holiness as cover while it curses, accuses, and harms. Anyone who's been in ministry knows how bad this is in ministry. is bad. I mean, it's ugly. So people keep asking me, start a church in Denver and we'll move there. Like, no, I'm not a pastor now. I'm a teacher and I just want to teach. But boy, when you start any institution like that, ugh. I mean, it's people. And there's just just no thanks. Everywhere you look, big or small. In fact, the smaller ones are often really, really worse. The true healer is the one who opens your eyes, takes the venom himself, and leads you into life. Everything else, no matter what name it uses, belongs on the other side. We have been turned against the Nachash. That is what Yahweh said he would do. And that is exactly what he has done. And it's time for us to recognize how we have been led into this and to say, I recognize it. I'm not going to fall for these deceptions anymore. Let's pray. Father, we love you and we thank you so very, very much for this time. These are difficult things to hear from many of us. They rattle our cage. This goes against everything. This is the exact opposite of everything that people that are sincere, people that love us and care about us have told us. And those people will be upset. They will be angry. They will cry when we begin to walk down the path of truth. We ask for courage. We ask for wisdom and knowledge and understanding and love to saturate us, to guide us, to lead us into all truth. We ask, Father, for your Holy Spirit to come and fill us. For those that have listened all the way through and now are just in confusion and they're hearing in their head, God is not a God of confusion. Remind them that Yahweh is nothing but confusion. That the right thing to do is to come and sit at the feet of Jesus and listen and learn. We ask healing for all those that have been wounded by the very institutions that bear the symbol of the Nachash, but have done instead so much harm. We ask that the healing power of Jesus would come, would liberate us from our pain and our suffering. We ask that you would just continue to guide us into what is true, what is real. And we ask all of this in the name of your incredible, soon coming Son, Jesus. I understand these things are hard, putting this together, and I mean, this took a week to put together, and just reading through it and thinking about how people are going to react to this. And I know that there's some tough things that you've just heard. Just boils your brain. And I hope that you know that I am sincere in my approach to this, that I have no desire to mislead or deceive anybody. but I want to get to the bottom of what is real, what is true. My faith, my hope, my trust is in Jesus. And if you will just do the same, put your faith and hope and trust in Jesus, to the exclusion of all others, then you will be okay. I could talk for another half hour here summarizing all of this, but we've gone a long time here. And so thank you for joining me and listening all the way to the end here. And I will see you next Sunday live on X or later on YouTube. And I hope that you can come and join us live, though. There's a good thing about being live is that the more live people we have, the more the algorithm will tell other people to check this out. And so growth requires growth. So please come and join us live on X when we do this. I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.